Sir, please drink so you can be strong.
A poor water seller saved a thirsty billionaire from dying. The bridge builder. The sun, a merciless bronze disk, hung over the sprawling city of Lagos, baking the asphalt until the air shimmered with heat. In the upscale district of Ikoyi, the air conditioners hummed a steady chorus of cool indifference. But here, in the labyrinthine heart of Ajigunle, the heat was a living, pressing entity, smelled in the scent of drying fish and hot dust, felt in the slick sweat on every brow. Yet, in a dusty compound shaded by a lone, stubborn mango tree, a different kind of energy pulsed. Children's laughter, clear and bright, cut through the heavy air. They chased a half-deflated football around a yard, their feet kicking up puffs of red earth. This was the Adekunle Haven, a home for children who had known too much loss too soon. And its founder, Bola Adekunle, was not a distant benefactor whose name was merely etched on a plaque. He was there, in the thick of it. He sat on a low wooden bench, his expensive linen trousers be damned, with a small boy named Chitty carefully braiding colored threads into his wrist. Bola's head was bent in concentration, listening not to stock reports, but to Chitty's earnest story about a lizard he had befriended. Uncle Bola, a teenage girl, Ngozi, approached, holding a tattered textbook. "This equation, it is forming K-leg for me." Bola smiled, a warm, crinkling expression that reached his eyes. "Let's see the K-leg," he said, taking the book. For the next 10 minutes, the billionaire whose decisions moved markets was wholly focused on quadratic equations. This was Bola Adekunle's true currency. To the financial world, he was a titan of industry, a shrewd investor with a Midas touch in real estate and telecommunications. But in the communities that wove the true fabric of the city, he was known by another name, the bridge builder. The moniker was born from his philosophy. "Nigeria is a land of terrible gulfs," he often said to his skeptical board members. "Gulfs between wealth and poverty, between hope and despair. I do not build skyscrapers to look down from. I build bridges to walk across." His bridges were not made of steel and concrete, but of action. A mile away, in the neighborhood of Makoko, his latest project was underway. For years, the community had drawn brown, silty water from the lagoon, a source of perpetual sickness. Today, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a percussion drill was the most beautiful music in the world. Bola's borehole project was nearing completion. He visited daily, not in a convoy, but in a simple SUV, rolling up his sleeves to speak with the engineers and the anxious elders. "Clean water isn't a luxury," he told the gathered crowd, his voice calm but carrying. "It is the foundation. With it, your children's bellies won't ache with typhoid. Your wives won't spend hours walking to fetch a dirty pot. This is the first bridge. From sickness to health." An old woman, Mama Iko, had grasped his hand, her own gnarled and strong. "God will bless you, my son. But why? Why do you see us?" Bola had patted her hand. "Because we are from the same soil, Mama. Just different patches." This sentiment, so natural to him, was the core of his being, but also, unknowingly, the seed of a coming storm. For in his own ancestral village, several hours north of the city's frenzy, a young man named Kolo watched the news reports of Bola's philanthropy with a heart turning to acid. Kola saw the bridges, but all he felt was the gulf, a deep, widening chasm separating his own stagnant life from Bola's soaring one. He saw a man building for strangers, and a bitter question took root. What of his own? But on this day, in the Ajigunle compound, such darkness felt a world away. As the afternoon sun began to soften, Bola gathered the children. He didn't give a grand speech. He simply told them a story, a folk tale about the tortoise and the wisdom of slow, steady progress. Their faces, turned up to his, were maps of pure absorption. His driver, Ibrahim, a man who had been with him for 15 years, watched from near the car. He saw how Bola's shoulders, often tight with the weight of corporate battles, relaxed here. He saw the genuine light in his boss's eyes. "The office is his head," Ibrahim would later tell his wife. "But this place, these people, that is his heart." As dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Bola finally stood, his wrist adorned with Chitty's slightly lopsided bracelet. He said his goodbyes, promising to return for the borehole's commissioning in Makoko. The children clung to his hands until the last moment. Driving away, the compound fading in the rearview mirror, Bola felt the familiar, profound peace that always followed these visits. He looked at the colorful threads on his wrist, a simpler, truer measure of wealth than any bank statement. He was building bridges, one child, one borehole, one act of seeing someone at a time. He believed in the work, in the goodness it fostered. He had no way of knowing that from the shadows of his most virtuous act, the choice to prioritize a village's water over one man's demand, a plot was already being woven. A plot that would soon test every bridge he had ever built, and leave him stranded, desperately in need of a kindness as simple and as profound as a cup of water. The shadow of envy. The village of Ijoba was a tapestry of quiet struggles, woven with threads of red earth, rustling maize fields, and the slow, patient rhythm of a life far removed from Lagos's electric frenzy. Here, time was measured not in minutes, but in seasons, success not in billions, but in a full harvest and children who remembered their roots. In the compound of the late carpenter Adebayo, his son Kola sat on a worn wooden stool, the skeletal frame of a broken radio scattered at his feet. His fingers, skilled and restless, teased at the wires without real purpose. His gaze, however, was fixed not on the circuitry, but on the small, grainy screen of a second-hand smartphone. The video, shared endlessly on social media, showed Bola Adekunle, their Bola, standing before a cheering crowd in Makoko, turning a giant tap. A crystalline arc of water, captured in stunning high definition, burst forth. The caption read, "The bridge builder does it again. Water flows in Makoko." A muscle twitched in Kola's jaw. The cheers from the phone's tiny speaker felt like a personal taunt. His mother's voice, weary from years of bearing burdens alone, called from the dark doorway of their modest home. "The light is going. Leave that thing and help me bring in the washing." "Coming," he muttered, but did not move. He let the video play again. He watched Bola's easy smile, the crisp, white agbada he wore that seemed untouched by the surrounding dust, the way community elders bowed slightly to shake his hand. Oga, big man. A memory, sharp as a thorn, pricked him. They had been boys together, right here in Ijoba. Bola, serious and bookish, Kola, agile and popular. Bola's father, a stern teacher, had scraped together everything to send his son to a good school in the town. Kola's own father, the carpenter, had promised the same. "When I finish this big contract for the new headmaster's shelves," he'd say, ruffling Kola's hair. But the contract never came. Then the cough did, deep and racking, and Kola's future was buried alongside his father, the promised shelves left unfinished in a dusty corner of the workshop. Bola had gone away. To secondary school, to university, to Lagos. His visits home became events, a new car each time, louder generator, bigger donations during the annual festival. Kola stayed. He repaired radios, fixed broken chairs, did odd jobs. He became the village engineer, a title that tasted of pity. Each time Bola returned, he would seek Kola out, press a folded wad of naira into his hand. "For your good work, brother," Bola would say. "Kola, brother." The word, once a bond, now curdled in Kola's stomach. The money was a bandage on a festering wound. It wasn't partnership, it was patronage. It screamed of the distance between them. Bola was building bridges across the nation, but the oldest bridge, the one linking their two childhood compounds, lay in ruins, submerged under a flood of inequality. The final, bitter seed was sown 2 months ago. Emboldened by desperation and a foolish flicker of hope, Kola had borrowed money for transport to Lagos. He'd worn his best clothes, a polo shirt with a faded logo and trousers with a sharp, carefully preserved crease. He found his way to the imposing glass fortress of Adekunle Holdings. He didn't get past the marble lobby. The security, sleek in their uniforms, eyed him with polite suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "I am his brother," Kola stated, drawing himself up. "From the village. He will see me." A call was made. After a long wait, he was escorted not to the panoramic office on the top floor, but to a small, sterile meeting room. Bola entered, not with the relaxed joy he showed in Adekunle, but with the brisk air of a man between meetings. Yet, his smile upon seeing Kola was genuine. "Kola, this is a surprise. How is home? How is Mama?" They exchanged pleasantries, but the gulf was palpable in the chilled air, in the glass table between them. Kola, his heart hammering, finally blurted his plan. Bola, I need to go. This place, it is squeezing the life from me. I want to study computer engineering. In America, you have to help me. You have to send me. Bola had listened, steepling his fingers. When Kola finished, breathless, Bola leaned forward, his expression one of frustrating, infuriating calm. Kola, I hear you. America is a big dream. But listen, the borehole project in the village, the one we have been planning for years, the drillers are finally mobilizing next month. The children are still drinking from that muddy stream where we used to catch tadpoles. Let us finish this first. Let me secure their health, their future. Then, we secure yours. Be calm, my brother. Let's do this properly. One bridge at a time. Be calm. The words echoed in Kola's head now, sitting in the deepening Ijoba dusk as he watched the Makoko water flow on his screen. Be calm. While Bola watered strangers, he asked for patience. While Bola built monuments to his own generosity, he offered Kola vague promises. The borehole for the village was just another of Bola's projects, another line in his biography of benevolence. For Kola, it was a delay, a dismissal. It was proof that in Bola's grand architecture of bridges, there was no designed exit for him. A deep, cold fury settled in Kola's bones, colder than the evening dew. This wasn't jealousy anymore. It was a stark, clear-eyed assessment. Bola had the power to change a life with a snap of his fingers, yet he chose to lecture about sequence. He spoke of soil, but he lived in a penthouse. Kola switched off the phone. The cheerful video died, leaving only the sounds of the village, a goat bleating, a mother calling a child, the eternal chorus of crickets. In that moment, the last tether of childhood kinship snapped. The shadow of envy solidified into something hard, actionable, and dark. He would not wait for a bridge to be built to him. He would tear one down. If Bola would not give him a future, then Bola would pay for his own. He looked down at his skilled, restless hands. They could rewire a radio, fix an engine. Now, they would plot a different kind of circuitry, a circuit of revenge. The plan began not as a detailed map, but as a single, burning objective. Make him pay. Make him feel a fraction of the powerlessness Kola tasted every single day. The demand. The cold fury that had taken root in Kola's chest didn't dissipate. It grew, nourished by every mundane struggle of the following week. Fetching water from the very stream Bola had promised to replace, the metallic taste of it on his tongue was a constant reminder. Fixing a neighbor's generator for a pittance, the grease under his nails felt like the stain of his own stagnancy. Each small hardship was a drop feeding a resentful river. He could no longer bear the passive watching. The grainy videos on his phone were not enough. He needed to see it up close, the scale of the life that was being denied to him. He needed to stoke his own rage until it was hot enough to forge a plan. With the last of the money from his odd jobs, he boarded a rickety bus back to Lagos, a different purpose hardening his features. This time, he didn't go to the glass fortress. Instead, he became a ghost in Bola's wake. He lurked on the fringes of Ajagunal, watching from a distance as Bola played football with the orphans, his expensive loafers coated in red dust. He saw the unguarded laughter, the easy touch on a child's shoulder. It made something ache in Kola's own chest, an ache he violently suppressed. He plays father to the fatherless, Kola thought bitterly, while his own brother from the same soil is left to rot. He followed the convoy, just 2 cars. Bola was not a man for outrageous displays, to Makoko. From a distance, he watched the commissioning ceremony for the borehole. He saw the tears of gratitude, the speeches from local chiefs calling Bola a son of the soil. The phrase was a knife in Kola's ears. He is a son of their soil now, but what of his own? He saw Bola drink the first cup of the new water, raising it to the crowd like a toast. Kola's throat was parched, but not from physical thirst. His reconnaissance revealed a pattern, a vulnerability cloaked in virtue. Bola's most predictable ritual was his Saturday. He would spend the entire day at his Ikoyi office, often well past sunset, immersed in work so his weekdays could be cleared for his bridge building. He would then drive home alone with his driver, Ibrahim, late at night, taking a scenic but lonely route along the lagoon that offered a moment of quiet before returning to his family. It was on one of these Saturday nights, as the city's frenzy dipped into a low hum, that Kola decided to act. The plan was not fully formed, but the demand was. He wouldn't skulk in shadows any longer. He would confront the source of his pain directly, one last time, before the point of no return. He didn't wait at the office or the home. He positioned himself at a dimly lit stretch of the lagoon road, near a cluster of struggling coconut trees. He saw the familiar SUV approach, its headlights cutting through the mist rising off the water. With a courage born of pure desperation, he stepped into the road, directly in its path. Ibrahim slammed the brakes. The car swerved slightly, coming to a halt a few feet from Kola. "Jesus, madman!" Ibrahim exclaimed, rolling down his window to shout. But from the back seat, Bola had already seen the face in the headlights. "Ibrahim, wait," he said, his voice low with surprise. He rolled down his own window. "Kola, is that you? What are you doing here? Is everything all right at home?" Kola walked to the window. In the interior light, Bola looked tired but concerned. Kola's own reflection in the dark glass was that of a stranger, eyes blazing, jaw tight. "Everything is not all right, Bola," Kola said, his voice flat, devoid of the respect he'd once forced. He dispensed with brother, with Uncle Bola. He used his name like a weapon. "I am here for my answer. I am not leaving without it." Bola sighed, a weary sound that further infuriated Kola. "Kola, it is late. This is not the place. Come to the office on Monday, we will talk." "No." The word exploded from Kola, sharp in the quiet night. "We talk now. You see me now. I am tired of waiting for your convenient time. The borehole in the village? I don't care about it. Let the children drink sand. What about me?" Bola's expression shifted from concern to a stern disappointment. "Kola, listen to yourself. Let the children drink sand. This is not you. You don't know who I am." Kola shot back, leaning into the window. "You only know the boy you left behind. I am a man now, and I demand what is due to me. You will send me abroad. To America. I have the papers, I have the school. You will pay the fees, the ticket, everything. Now. Not after the borehole. Now." There it was. The demand. No request, no plea. An ultimatum, delivered on a dark, lonely road. Bola studied his face for a long moment. The silence was filled only with the lapping of the lagoon water. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, terribly calm, each word measured and deliberate. It was the voice he used in boardrooms to shut down foolish proposals. "Kola, you are my brother from home, but you do not make demands of me. I told you we would address your future after the village project. That project is a commitment to our people. Your future is part of that, but it must come in its turn." He leaned forward, his gaze intent. "You need to be calm. Let us do this properly. Go home. We will talk on Monday. Be calm. Properly. Go home." Each word was a match thrown on the pyre of Kola's hopes. Bola was not even angry. He was dismissive. He was rearranging Kola's life like a line item on a charitable budget, deferring it with infuriating patience. The last shred of Kola's restraint evaporated. The vague plan in his mind crystallized into cold, hard intent in that instant. He did not shout. He simply straightened up, his eyes locking with Bola's in the dim light. The friendly familiarity was gone, replaced by a void. "Okay, Bola," Kola said, his voice now dangerously quiet. "You have given me your answer. I have heard you clearly. We will do things properly." He took a step back from the car, his figure receding into the shadows. Bola, misinterpreting the retreat as acceptance, felt a pang of regret. "Kola, wait." But Kola had already turned and melted into the darkness beneath the coconut trees. He didn't look back. The conversation was over. The pleading was over. All that remained was the plan. As he walked away, the sound of the SUV driving off behind him wasn't the end of a conversation. It was the starting pistol. Bola had chosen his bridges. Now, Kola would burn them all. The plot. The lagoon road disappeared behind Kola, swallowed by the night, and the roar of blood in his ears. Bola's words, "Be calm, properly," replayed in his mind, not as a plea, but as a mantra for the vengeance to come. He didn't return to Ijoba. He went to the underbelly of Lagos, to a cramped, airless room in a face-me-isu building in Ijora, where the smell of stale OG and hopelessness hung thick in the air. This was the domain of his old friend, Deli, and Deli's cousin, Tiga. Both were products of the same grinding system, but where Kola's resentment had festered into a sharp point, theirs had diffused into petty crime and bluster. Kola found them arguing over a malfunctioning portable generator, its innards spilling onto a dirty newspaper. "See this useless country," Deli was saying, waving a spanner. Even machine, no day work again. What didn't you expect? Tiga replied, lighting a cigarette. When the big men up there are drinking champagne, and Cola slammed the flimsy door shut. Both men jumped. In the stark light of a single bulb, Cola looked wild. His clothes were rumpled from the journey, but his eyes held a terrifying, focused clarity. Big man matter don't finish for talk, Cola announced, his voice low and steady. Nah, action time now. Deli and Tiga exchanged a glance. They knew Cola's obsession with the billionaire from his village. They'd heard the rants. But this was different. What had happened? Deli asked, dropping the spanner. Cola didn't sit. He paced the small room, a caged animal outlining its bars. I asked him, face to face. I gave him a simple chance. To do the right thing. To remember where he came from. He stopped, turning to them. He told me to be calm. To wait my turn. Him day give pure water to strangers for Makoko. But for his own brother, nah wait. Tiga snorted. Nah way. All of dem be the same. Dog way get bone no day answer call. But we go collect the bone from the dog, Cola said, a grim smile touching his lips. It was devoid of humor. We go collect everything. He laid it out, not as a fantasy, but as a tactical briefing. He had done his reconnaissance. He spoke of Bola's Saturday rituals, the long hours in the nearly empty office building, the late-night drive home with only the driver. He described the lonely stretch of Lagoon Road, perfect for an interception. We no go ask for money again, Cola said, his eyes gleaming. We go take it. We go take him. Him be the key to the vault. Deli shifted, unease creeping into his bravado. Wait, wait, wait. You mean kidnap? Oga Bola Adakunal? That one no be small keiko. Him security strong like iron. On Saturday night, for that road, him security not just one driver and one engine, Cola countered, his voice slicing through their doubt. I have watched him for months. He thinks he is safe because he is doing good. That is his weakness. He outlined the plan with a chilling precision that surprised even himself. They would use Tiga's rickety white van, the one he used for moving jobs. They would block the road with it, as if it had broken down. Deli, who had once apprenticed as a mechanic, would play the role, hood up, pretending to fiddle with the engine. Cola and a fourth man, a hulking, silent figure they called Bone, who was known in the area for his willingness to do anything for a price, would be hidden in the shadows of the coconut grove. When him car stopped, Cola continued, Bone will show the gun. Not just for show, to make them fear. We grab the Oga, put him for van. Quick, quick. No violence unless absolutely necessary. We take his phone, his wallet. Then we disappear. And the driver? Tiga asked, his cigarette forgotten. We tie him and leave him for bush. By the time he finds help, we will be far, far away. The room was silent except for the buzz of the bulb. The enormity of it settled over them. This wasn't snatching a phone or breaking into a shop. This was crossing a line from which there was no return. Deli sucked his teeth. The money go too much. How we go even arrange him? Who to contact? Leave that to me, Cola said. I know the family. I know who to call. The first call will not even be for money. It will be for a plane ticket. A visa. A new life. That is my share. The ransom money? That is for all of us. The mention of a plane ticket, of escape, lit a desperate fire in Deli and Tiga's eyes. They saw not just cash, but a way out of the room, the city, the life that had trapped them. Cola was no longer just selling revenge. He was selling a dream. For how long we go hold him? Tiga pressed. Cola had thought of this too. There is a place, an uncompleted building near Baidagri. My mother's distant brother started it, then abandoned it when he went bankrupt. It is deep inside bush. No one goes there. We can keep him there for days, a week, until they meet our demands. For hours, they pored over the details. The timing, the route, the backup plans. Cola was the architect, his mind weaving a tapestry of malice from the threads of his intimate knowledge of Bola's habits and his own intimate desperation. He thought of the borehole project in the village, now a symbol of Bola's misplaced priorities. Let him see what it feels like to be thirsty, Cola thought savagely. Let him see what it feels like to have your fate in someone else's hands. As the first gray light of dawn crept through the single window, the plot was set. It was no longer a shadow in Cola's heart. It was a blueprint. The materials were a van, a fake gun. They agreed a real one was too risky, rope, and blindfolds. The foundation was envy. The structure was revenge. Cola looked at Deli and Tiga, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and excitement. They were no longer just idle friends. They were co-conspirators. The bridge builder, in his lofty world of good deeds, had no idea that in the swamp below, a trap had been meticulously laid, not for an animal, but for the hunter himself. The plot was complete. All that remained was the waiting, and then the ambush. The ambush. The waiting was a special kind of torture. For Kola, the following week was a blur of nerve-wracking tension and sharp, crystalline focus. Every mundane act felt like a rehearsal. Tying a bundle of firewood was a practice with rope. Glancing at a car's license plate was surveillance. The night air, when he stepped outside, felt charged with impending thunder. Saturday dawned, clear and hot. In his Ijora room, the atmosphere was thick with a sickly anticipation. Deli obsessively checked the van's oil and tires for the 10th time. Tiga chain-smoked, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the table. Bone, the fourth man, sat in a corner, sharpening a long, wicked-looking machete on a stone. The shhhgay sound was the only conversation he offered. Kola was unnervingly still. He had laid out their tools on a piece of sackcloth, 2 rough burlap sacks for blindfolds, several coils of nylon rope, a pair of heavy-duty scissors, and the star of their show, a realistic-looking black pistol, a replica Deli had procured from a market stall that sold movie props. In the dim light, it was convincing enough. Remember, Kola's voice cut through the tense silence. No unnecessary violence. The gun is for fear. The fear is our weapon. We move fast, we move quiet. Like ghosts. As evening fell, they made their move. The white van, now with a deliberately loose battery terminal to justify a breakdown, coughed to life. They drove in silence towards the Lagoon Road, the city's vibrant Saturday nightlife glowing beside them, a world they were about to violently step away from. The chosen spot was perfect. A bend in the road, shielded on one side by a thick grove of coconut trees and tall elephant grass, and on the other by the inky, silent expanse of the lagoon. The streetlight here had been broken for months, plunging the area into deep shadow. Kola and Bone melted into the foliage, their dark clothes making them invisible. Deli parked the van askew, its bonnet propped open. He bent over the engine, a picture of frustrated distress. Tiga sat in the passenger seat, a cap pulled low, playing lookout. Then, they waited. Minutes stretched like hours. The sound of the lagoon lapping at the shore was a mocking, rhythmic clock. Kola's heart thudded against his ribs, a frantic drum counting down to a point of no return. He thought of Bola's calm, dismissive face. Be calm. The memory steeled his resolve. Then, the headlights. 2 bright orbs approaching from the direction of Ikoyi. A sleek, dark SUV. Kola's breath caught. It was him. Now. Kola whispered into the small walkie-talkie, his voice a dry croak. Deli slammed the van's hood down, not latching it, and waved his arms frantically, stepping into the middle of the road. The SUV slowed, then stopped a few feet away. Ibrahim, the driver, rolled down his window. My friend, problem? Ibrahim called out, his tone helpful but cautious. This useless machine, Deli cried, his performance fueled by genuine terror. It just died for middle of road. I beg, can you help push him small to the side? In the back seat, Bola looked up from his tablet. He was tired, the glow of his screen illuminating his face. He saw the distressed man, the broken-down van, a minor inconvenience on his way home. Help him, Ibrahim, Bola said, his voice muffled by the glass. Let's clear the road. This was the moment. As Ibrahim opened his door and stepped out, Kola and Bone erupted from the darkness. They moved with a speed born of adrenaline and malice. Bone went straight for Ibrahim, clamping a massive hand over his mouth from behind and pressing the cold, fake barrel of the gun to his temple. No sound, Bone growled. If you shout, you die here. Simultaneously, Kola wrenched open the rear passenger door. The interior light blazed on, illuminating Bola's face, which shifted from weary confusion to stunned horror in a split second. Kola? What is? Out. Now. Kola's voice was a low, venomous hiss. He brandished his own replica gun, his eyes wild in the stark light. All the imagined speeches, the accusations, evaporated. There was only the script of the plot. Bola, his mind reeling, complied. He stepped out, his legs unsteady. Kola, think about what you are doing. This is madness. Madness is drinking champagne while your brother eats dust. Cola spat, his composure cracking for a second to reveal the raw fury beneath. He shoved Bola towards the open side door of the van, where Tigo waited, eyes wide with panic. Deli was already back in the driver's seat, the van's engine now miraculously rumbling to life. Bone shoved the terrified, compliant Ibrahim towards the grassy verge, tying his wrists and ankles with practiced speed before gagging him with a strip of cloth. Within 60 seconds of the SUV stopping, it was over. Bola was pushed into the windowless back of the van. The door slammed shut, plunging him into utter blackness. Rough hands forced him to the metal floor, tied his wrists behind his back, his ankles together. The scratchy burlap sack was pulled over his head, stealing his sight and muffling his protests. He could smell engine oil, sweat, and fear, his own. The van jerked into motion, speeding away from the lagoon, leaving Ibrahim trussed up in the grass and Bola's empty, expensive SUV sitting silently under the broken streetlight, its doors hanging open like a gaping wound. The ambush was a brutal, shocking success. They had snatched the bridge builder from his bridge. Now, they were driving him into the heart of darkness, and the only sound in the blackness of the van was Bola's ragged, desperate breathing and the relentless, rolling thunder of the wheels carrying him away from everything he knew. The concrete prison. The journey in the blackness was a disorienting nightmare. The van lurched and swayed, its suspension groaning against potholes that felt like craters. Each jolt sent Bola's bound body sliding across the gritty metal floor, his shoulders and hips protesting with sharp bursts of pain. The burlap sack over his head was a universe of its own, hot, scratchy, and smelling of mold and dried maize. It filtered the world into muffled, terrifying sounds. The rough laughter of the men in the front, the static hiss of a radio tuned to a noisy station, the relentless whine of the engine pushed too hard. Time lost all meaning. It stretched and contracted with the van's movements. Was it an hour? 3. He tried to focus, to plan, but terror was a thick fog in his mind. The image of Cola's face, twisted by a hatred Bola had never imagined, eclipsed everything. His brother, the boy he'd shared stolen mangoes with, now his captor. The van finally slowed, turning off the relatively smooth asphalt onto something uneven and punishing. Gravel crunched, then gave way to the soft, sucking sound of mud. Branches screeched against the sides of the vehicle. They were deep in the bush. The van stopped. The engine died, leaving a silence so profound it rang in Bola's ears. Then, doors squealed open. Rough hands grabbed him, hauling him out. His feet, still bound, couldn't find purchase. He stumbled and fell, the impact driving the air from his lungs. The damp, fecund smell of dense vegetation and rotting leaves filled his nostrils, overpowering the sack smell. Move. It was Cola's voice, close to his ear, devoid of any trace of their shared past. He was half-dragged, half-carried over uneven ground. Twigs snapped underfoot, and thorny vines caught at his trousers. Then, the sounds changed. Their footsteps began to echo slightly. The air grew cooler, stiller, and carried a new scent, the damp, mineral smell of concrete and wet earth. He was shoved forward, and he fell again, this time onto a hard, gritty surface. Dust puffed up around him. A door, a heavy, metal one by the sound of its groan and clang, swung shut behind him. The finality of the sound was a blow to his heart. For a moment, there was only the sound of his own panicked breathing inside the sack. Then, hands worked at the knot behind his head. The sack was yanked off. Bola blinked, his eyes stinging in the sudden, murky gray light. He was in a small, square room. The walls were bare, unfinished concrete blocks, weeping with dark, damp patches. A single, high window, no bigger than a bread loaf and barred with rusting rebar, allowed a sickly shaft of moonlight to cut through the gloom. The floor was covered in a fine layer of construction dust and debris, chips of broken block, dried cement, and the glitter of shattered bottle glass. In one corner sat a plastic gallon jug of water, half full, and a lonely, withered mango. Cola stood over him, backlit by a handheld torch one of the others held. His face was a mask of grim satisfaction. Deli and Tiga hovered behind him, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear at what they had done. Bone was already turning to leave, his job apparently done for now. Welcome to your new office, Oga, Kola said, his voice echoing in the empty space. No boreholes to dig here. No orphans to play with. Just you and your thoughts. Kola, please. Bola's voice was hoarse, cracked with thirst and dread. You can still stop this. Whatever you want, we can talk. This way, this leads only to destruction. Destruction? Kola let out a short, bitter laugh. You built your palace on my destruction, Bola. You just never looked down to see the cracks in the foundation. He nudged the plastic jug with his foot. There's water. Think of it as your own private borehole. With that, he turned. The three men filed out of the room. The metal door groaned shut again, and Bola heard the horrifying, definitive sound of a heavy padlock being snapped into place. A key turned. Then, their footsteps receded, leaving him in a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. He was alone. The reality of his situation crashed down with the force of a collapsing building. He was trapped in an uncompleted, isolated structure somewhere in the vast, unknowable bush. His hands and feet were tied. He was at the mercy of a man whose soul had curdled into something unrecognizable. He tested the ropes. They were tight, expertly tied, biting into his skin. He looked around his cell. The concrete was unyielding. The window was too high and too small. The door was solid metal. Despair, cold and slick, began to coil in his gut. Then, from beyond his door, he heard them. Their voices, initially low, began to rise, carrying through the bare concrete halls of the abandoned building. They were in another room, not far away. Must be worth billions. We should ask for 500 million. That was Tiga's voice, high with greedy excitement. Foolishness. Now 1 billion minimum. Deli countered. With that kind of money, we go disappear forever. Bahamas. America. Forget money first. Kola's voice cut through, sharp and authoritative. My ticket comes first. That is the agreement. We call his wife, we tell her, visa, ticket, to America. Then we talk about ransom. How we go even do the transaction. Tiga again, the practical worries setting in. Bank transfer not trace. Bitcoin, I know even understand him. We go use a middleman. A lawyer way no ask question. Their argument grew more heated, a chaotic tangle of avarice and incompetence. They debated amounts, methods, and who should make the call. The sheer amateurish disorder of it was almost more frightening than cold, professional efficiency. These were desperate men, playing a game far beyond their understanding, and he was the prize they were already fighting over. As their voices rose in discord, a strange thing happened. The cold despair in Bola's gut met the heat of a sudden, wild hope. Their disorganization was a weakness. Their greed was a distraction. They were not watching him. They were too busy counting imaginary money. He looked at the ropes on his ankles, then at a sharp, gleaming edge of a broken block near his foot. It was a slim chance, a desperate gamble, but it was the only move on the board. The concrete prison held his body, but as he listened to the chaotic counsel of his captors, Bola's mind, the mind that had built empires and bridges, began to work. It was time to start digging a new kind of tunnel, a tunnel to freedom. He inched his body towards the jagged concrete edge, the voices next door his chaotic, unwitting cover. The desperate escape. The jagged edge of the broken concrete block was a silent promise in the gloom. Every shout, every heated disagreement from the next room was a gift of time, a curtain of noise behind which Bola could work. He shuffled his body, an agonizing inch at a time, the rough floor scraping his skin through his torn clothes. Dust filled his nostrils, but he dared not cough. Finally, his bound ankles made contact with the protruding shard. It was sharper than he'd hoped, a cruel, irregular spike. He positioned the coarse nylon rope against it and began to saw. The movement was excruciatingly limited. He had to use the muscles of his legs and hips, a subtle back-and-forth grind that sent vibrations of pain up his spine. The rope, thick and stubborn, resisted. Minutes stretched, marked only by the rhythm of his effort and the cadence of the argument next door. My own share must be for London, not America. Tiga's voice, shrill with newfound ambition. You no even get passport. Deli shot back. Kola's voice, dripping with contempt, silenced them. You are all arguing like market women. The plan is set. First my exit. Then, the money. Without me, there is no plan. Bola tuned them out. His world narrowed to the connection between rope and stone. Sweat dripped into his eyes, mingling with the grime on his face. The initial strands of the rope began to fray, sending tiny fibers into the air. Hope, a dangerous and fragile thing, flickered in his chest. He sawed harder, ignoring the burn in his muscles. Snap! A single, muffled pop. Then another. The tension around his ankles loosened imperceptibly. He pulled his legs apart with a slow, steady pressure. The frayed threads gave way with a soft, final sigh. His feet were free. He lay still for a moment, breathing heavily, listening. The argument raged on, undisturbed. Phase 1 was complete, but his wrists were still bound tightly behind his back, the knots complex and secure. Getting to them was the real challenge. He rolled onto his side, then onto his stomach, his freed legs now an advantage. He brought his knees up towards his chest, working his bound hands down over his hips, under his bent legs. It was a contortionist's move, one his middle-aged body screamed in protest against. Every joint ached. His bruised ribs sent sharp jabs of pain through his torso. He bit down on his lip, tasting blood, to keep from crying out. Slowly, agonizingly, he pulled his wrists past his feet. Now his hands were in front of him. In the dim light, he could see the knots. They were tight, professional. His fingers, numb from lack of circulation, fumbled uselessly. His eyes darted around the room, landing on the plastic water jug. An idea, desperate and brutal, formed. He shuffled to the jug, unscrewed the cap with his teeth, and poured a small amount of water over the knot. He hoped it might loosen the fibers. It did little. Then, he looked at the cap itself, a hard, serrated plastic ring. It would have to do. He gripped the cap between his knees, positioned the knot against its sharpest edge, and began to rub. It was a maddeningly slow, inefficient process. The plastic slipped, his knees trembled with the effort. But he persisted, his focus absolute. The voices next door were rising again, a chaotic symphony of greed that was the perfect soundtrack to his desperate labor. After what felt like an eternity, a single loop of the knot snagged and began to unravel. It was enough. Working now with his teeth and his stiff, clumsy fingers, he picked and pulled at the loosened end. His fingernails tore, but he didn't feel it. Finally, with a last tug, the rope fell away from his wrists. He was untied. He sat there for a stunned second, rubbing his raw, aching wrists, staring at his free hands. The victory was profound, but terrifyingly small. He was still in a locked room, in an abandoned building, in the middle of nowhere, with armed captors just a wall away. The metal door was unthinkable, but the window. He stood, his legs wobbling beneath him, and approached the wall beneath the high, barred opening. He was tall, but not tall enough. He looked at the plastic jug. Emptying the remaining water onto the dusty floor, he upended it and placed it against the wall. It was unstable, but it gave him a precious few extra inches. He stepped onto it, his balance precarious. The plastic groaned, but held. He reached up, his fingers just brushing the cold, rough edges of the windowsill. He couldn't get a grip. He needed more height. His eyes fell on the only other object in the room, the withered mango. Useless, but the dust, the debris. Moving as quietly as a ghost, he used his hands to sweep piles of dry cement, dust, and broken block fragments into a mound against the wall. He combined this with the empty jug, creating a crude, unstable platform. This was the moment. Any sound, any shift in the noise from the next room, and he was finished. He took a deep, silent breath, stepped onto the makeshift pile, and pushed upwards. His fingers hooked over the sill. He pulled, his muscles screaming in protest. He got one elbow up, then the other. His face was at the bars. The opening was small, but he was not a large man. He twisted his head and one shoulder through the gap, the rusted rebar scraping against his back. He pushed, wriggled, ignoring the pain. The night air, fresh and cool, hit his face. With a final, gut-wrenching heave, he tumbled through the window, landing in a heap in the soft, wet earth on the other side. He lay there, panting, covered in mud and concrete dust, free of the room, but far from safe. He could still hear the muffled voices arguing about fortunes. They had not heard a thing. Bola Adekunle, the bridge builder, was no longer a captive. He was a fugitive in an endless, dark bush. He pushed himself to his feet, cast one last look at the grim silhouette of the uncompleted building, and did the only thing he could do. He turned, and he ran. Not towards a road, not towards a light, but away. Into the deep, swallowing darkness of the night. where every shadow could hide a root to trip him or a snake to strike, but where freedom, however desperate, now lay. The long night. The bush swallowed him whole. One moment he was scraping through a window. The next he was enveloped by a living, breathing darkness that was louder than any silence he had ever known. It was a cacophony of chirps, clicks, whirs, and the heavy rustle of unseen things moving through the undergrowth. The air was thick, humid, and smelled of damp earth, rotting vegetation, and the sweet, cloying scent of night-blooming flowers. Bola ran. He didn't think. Thought was a luxury that would lead to panic. His body, fueled by pure adrenaline and the primal instinct to survive, took over. He crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at his face and arms, thorns tearing fresh lines of fire across his skin. His expensive loafers, already ruined, slipped in the mud, sucking at his feet with every step. He stumbled, fell, scrambled up, and ran again. The moonlight, which had seemed so feeble through the window bars, was his only guide. It dappled the forest floor in patches of silvery gray, revealing treacherous roots and sudden dips just in time for him to lurch over or around them. He ran without direction, with only one mantra in his mind: away, away, away. Time lost all meaning. It was measured in the ragged gasp of his breath, the pounding of his heart against his bruised ribs, the rhythmic slap of wet leaves against his body. He imagined he heard shouts behind him, the crunch of pursuit. He pushed harder, his lungs burning. Each shadow became Kola, or the hulking bone, emerging from behind a tree. After a while, an hour, two, the adrenaline began to wane. A deep, bone-grinding exhaustion set in. His legs turned to lead, his strides shortening to a desperate, stumbling jog. He had to stop, leaning against the rough bark of a huge irako tree, his chest heaving. He listened. Only the night sounds. No pursuit. Yet, the reality of his situation began to seep through the cracks in his survival focus. He was lost. He was dehydrated, his throat a dry, cracked riverbed. He was bleeding from a dozen minor cuts. He was dressed in the tattered remains of a linen suit, a costume from another life entirely. He was a billionaire, a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, and he was now a terrified animal in a wilderness he did not understand. A wave of despair so profound it nearly buckled his knees washed over him. He thought of his wife, Aisha, probably frantic, surrounded by police. He thought of his children. He thought of the children in Ajagunal, waiting for him. He had built bridges to so many, and now he couldn't even find a path for himself. A sound to his left, a sudden, heavy rustle, jolted him back into the moment. He froze, his breath held. Two pinpricks of amber light reflected the low moon from a thicket. An animal? A predator? He didn't wait to find out. He pushed off the tree and began to move again, slower now, more carefully, but no less desperately. The night became a brutal marathon of endurance. He waded through streams he couldn't see, the cold water shocking his system. He crawled under fallen logs when the thicket became impassable. He used the stars when he could glimpse them through the canopy, trying to keep a vague westerly direction, hoping it would lead him to a road, a village, anything. Memories flashed, unbidden. The cool, sterile air of his office, the weight of a pen in his hand, the taste of the first cup of tea in the morning, the feel of a child's hand in his. These were the anchors of his old life, and they seemed as distant and unreachable as the moon itself. He was stripped down to his raw essence, a man who wanted to live. Dawn began as a subtle lightening in the east, a faint gray wash that diluted the absolute black. With it came a new kind of terror. The cover of darkness was receding. He would be visible, to his pursuers, to the world. He pushed through a final wall of thick, clinging vines and stumbled out of the tree lane. Before him was a wide, red earth road, and beyond it, the ordered chaos of a small town waking up, the distant crow of a rooster, the smell of wood smoke, the faint clatter of early morning activity. Civilization. Relief, so potent it made him dizzy, flooded him. He had survived the long night. He had escaped the bush. But as he stood there, at the edge of the road, watching a lone cyclist pedal past in the dim light, he saw the man glance at him, his eyes widening in alarm before he pedaled faster, away. Bola looked down at himself. His clothes were shredded and plastered with mud, leaves, and dark, dried blood. His face was scratched and filthy, his hair a wild nest. He was barefoot now, his shoes lost to the swamp. He was no longer Bola Adekunle, the bridge builder. The long night had transformed him. It had stripped him of his identity, his dignity, his very humanity. To the waking world, he was not a victim to be helped. He was something else, something to be feared, avoided, scorned. The escape was over. A new, more harrowing trial was about to begin. The Invisible Man. The Red Earth Road was a tantalizing ribbon of hope, but as Bola stood at its edge, the gulf between it and him felt wider than any he had ever tried to bridge. The first golden rays of the sun, which should have meant warmth and safety, instead illuminated him in horrifying detail. He was a specter from the bush, a creature of mud and tatters. He tried to stand tall, to muster some semblance of the authority that had always been his birthright. But his body betrayed him. Shivering from spent adrenaline and the morning chill, hunched over from exhaustion. He took a tentative step onto the road, the warm dust a shocking contrast to the cool, wet earth of the forest. A woman appeared from a nearby footpath, a bright plastic bucket balanced on her head. She was singing a soft hymn. Bola's heart leapt. He moved towards her, raising a hand. "Sister, please." The hymn died in her throat. Her eyes, initially soft, snapped wide with fear. She took in the wild hair, the blood-crusted scratches, the clothes that looked like they'd been torn by animals. He was not a man. He was an omen. With a sharp gasp, she swerved wide off the path, her bucket wobbling precariously, and hurried away without a backward glance, her hymn now a frightened mutter. Bola's hand fell to his side. The rejection was a physical blow. He swallowed, the action painful in his parched throat. He had to keep moving. He trudged along the roadside, the town growing closer. The sounds of life amplified. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the sizzle of akara in hot oil, the chatter of early market-goers. Each sound was a promise of community, of help. But as he entered the outskirts of the town, a place he would later learn was called Olok, the promise curdled. A group of young men lounging by a makeshift kiosk turned as he approached. Their laughter died. "Huh. See as this madman day look," one said, pointing with his chin. "While a day inside those kind eyes make we no near am," another advised, making a protective sign with his fingers. They watched him pass like he was a dangerous, stray dog. Bola tried again. He saw an elderly man sitting in front of a bicycle repair shop, sipping tea from a small cup. The man's face was lined with wisdom, the kind of elder who listened in his village. "Sir, I beg you." Bola croaked, his voice a stranger's. "I have been attacked. I need help. A phone. To call my people." The old man peered at him, not with compassion, but with sharp scrutiny. He saw the expensive, albeit ruined, fabric of the trousers. He saw the quality wristwatch, now obscured by grime. To him, it didn't speak of wealth, but of theft. A madman or a thief, or both. "Help," the old man grunted. "The help you need is for them to catch you before you harm someone. Go from here before I call the area boys." Each interaction was a door slammed in his face. The very things that marked his true identity, the remnants of his fine clothes, his articulate plea, now worked against him, painting him as a cunning, dangerous lunatic. He was a blank canvas, and the town projected its deepest fears onto him. He passed a small Pentecostal church, its service in full, vibrant swing. The music spilled into the street. For a moment, he stood outside, a desperate hope flaring. These are people of God. They will help. He moved towards the open door. A deacon, standing guard at the entrance, stepped forward, his face a mask of stern piety. "This is a house of God. You cannot enter here in this state. You are unclean. Go and wash in the river. Pray for deliverance from whatever spirit is tormenting you." The man spoke as if Bola's condition was a moral failing, a spiritual affliction, not the result of violence. He was not a victim to be succored, but a sin to be shunned. The sun climbed higher, beating down on him. Thirst became a raging demon in his head. His vision began to swim at the edges. He saw a public tap where children were filling jerrycans. He stumbled towards it. The children scattered, screaming for their mothers. A woman came out, wielding a long broom like a weapon. He recoiled. He was not even worthy of a sip of communal water. He was now utterly invisible in the worst possible way. They saw his form, his filth, his perceived madness, but they did not see him. The billionaire, the philanthropist, the father, the husband. Bola Adekunle had been completely erased. In his place was a phantom of threat, a walking piece of societal refuse to be avoided and driven away. His strength, which had carried him through a night of terror in the bush, finally gave out. His legs, heavy with a fatigue deeper than sleep, simply stopped working. The world tilted. The sounds of the market, the shouts, the hymns, all blurred into a distant roar. He was near a busy motor park now, the heart of the town's comings and goings. The ground rushed up to meet him. He fell, not with a cry, but with a soft, final sigh. The dust of the road, the same dust he had hoped would lead him to salvation, puffed up around his fallen body. He lay there, a broken, discarded thing, as the tide of human traffic parted and flowed around him, careful not to touch. The invisible man had reached his end. Consciousness slipped away, not into the darkness of the bush, but into the profound darkness of utter hopelessness. The fall. Consciousness did not leave Bola in a clean sweep, but in ragged, fading tatters. The world became a distant slideshow of disconnected sensations. The sun's heat baking into the back of his torn shirt, the sharp sting of gravel against his cheek, the smell of diesel fumes and frying plantain from the motor park that now seemed a continent away. Sound retreated down a long tunnel. The blare of bus horns became faint bleats. The hawkers' cries turned into a meaningless hum. The scuff of countless feet passing by was the whisper of a receding tide. He had fallen not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, final surrender. His body, having run its desperate race, simply stopped. One moment he was stumbling, a ghost haunting the periphery of life. The next, he was part of the landscape, a shapeless heap on the dusty margin of the road leading into the Olok Motor Park. For the first few minutes, his mind fought. Flickers of thought, bright and desperate, sparked and died. Get up, Aisha. The children must get up. But the commands had no conduit. His muscles were unplugged. His will, that formidable force that had built empires and endured a night of terror, was ash. The rejection had been the final, crushing weight. The bush had hunted him, but the people had broken him. Time became elastic. He drifted in a gray, pain-filled haze. He was aware of the movement around him, but it held no meaning. A pair of worn sandals stopped a few feet from his face. He heard a low, thoughtful hum, and then the sandals moved on. A bus rumbled by, its exhaust coughing a cloud of black smoke over him. No one shouted for help. No one knelt to check his pulse. He was a familiar piece of roadside furniture, a broken-down crate, a sack of abandoned yams, a man who was no longer a man. The sun climbed to its zenith. The heat grew intense, a dry, punishing oven. His mouth was a desert. His lips cracked. He had thought he knew thirst in the concrete prison, in the bush. This was different. This was a thirst of the spirit as much as the body, a deep, hollow yearning for a single drop of kindness in a world that had shown him none. Visions swam in the heat haze above him. He saw the cool, glistening arc of water from the Makoko borehole. He saw the plastic jug in his cell. He saw the children at the tap, their mothers pulling them away from him. Water, the element of life, his life's latest work, had become a cruel and mocking symbol of everything he could not have. His breathing grew shallow. The noises of the motor park, the conductors yelling destinations, the engines revving, the lively chaos of Nigerian travel, faded into a single, dull roar. It was the sound of life moving on, relentlessly, indifferently. He was not part of it. He was a stain on its edge, soon to be bleached away by the sun. He thought of Kola, not with anger now, but with a strange, detached pity. Kola had wanted to make him powerless, to strip him of his wealth and status. He had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Bola was not just powerless, he was irrelevant. He had been erased. Darkness began to gather at the corners of his vision, not the friendly dark of night, but a thick, velvety nothingness that promised an end to the thirst, the pain, the profound loneliness. It was tempting to just let go, to stop being this invisible, suffering thing. Somewhere, a child laughed, a pure, bell-like sound that seemed to come from another universe. It was the last coherent sound he registered. His eyes, staring unseeingly at the gritty earth inches from his face, slowly closed. Bola Adekunle did not fall from a great height. He fell from the very concept of being seen, of being human. He fell into the dust, and the world, busy with its own survival, stepped over him. The bridge builder had reached the one chasm he could not cross, the abyss of indifference. And there, on the hard shoulder of a forgotten road, he lay still, a man who had finally, completely, fallen. The watchful eye. Amara's world was a square of dusty earth, a wooden table, and the sacred geometry of neatly stacked nylon sachets. Her shop was a prime spot, if such a word could be used for a few planks of wood, at the frenetic entrance to the Olok Motor Park. From dawn until her last sachet was sold, she was a fixed point in the swirling chaos of travelers, touts, and traders. Life had taught her vigilance. To notice the policeman whose thirst was a regular, welcome transaction. To spot the pickpocket working the crowd, so she could subtly shift her table and block his path. To see the weary mother with too many children and forget to count 2 sachets. Her eyes, large and luminous, missed little. They were the tools of her survival. The sun was a fierce weight on her headscarf when she first saw the man stumble from the direction of the bush path. Even from a distance, he was a discordant note in the motor park's symphony. His movement was all wrong, a lurching, disconnected stagger, like a puppet with its strings cut. As he drew nearer, her professional assessment, potential customer, morphed into a frown of concern. He was a spectacle of ruin. His clothes, once fine, were now banners of distress, flapping in tatters. He was caked in a patina of reddish mud and something darker that might be dried blood. But it was his eyes that held her. As he passed not 20 feet from her table, their gazes met for a fractured second. In them, she did not see madness, not the vacant, swirling chaos she knew from the truly lost souls who sometimes wandered through. She saw a profound, intelligent agony, a trapped awareness. It was the look of a man drowning in plain sight. Then he fell. It wasn't a collapse. It was a slow-motion crumpling, as if his bones had turned to water. He hit the ground with a soft thud she felt more than heard, and did not move. The motor park absorbed the event without a pause. A woman selling Acura glanced over, shook her head, and turned back to her bubbling oil. A bus conductor, shouting for passengers to Benin, now, stepped over the man's legs without breaking his chant. A young man on a smartphone walked a wide, careful arc around him. Amara watched. Her fingers, usually busy arranging and rearranging her wares, grew still. He is just resting, she told herself. The sun is hot. He will get up. 5 minutes passed. 10. A stray dog sniffed at the man's feet, then wandered off, uninterested. Flies began to circle. Still, he did not move. Not a twitch. The absolute stillness became louder than the park's din. It was the stillness of abandonment, and it echoed a familiar, hollow place inside her. She remembered finding her father, years ago, not moving in his bed, the life gone from him while the world outside their window had buzzed on, oblivious. A tight knot formed in her chest. This was different, she argued with herself. This was a stranger. A madman, perhaps. Getting involved was how trouble found poor women like her. She had her siblings to think of, Chitty and Neoma, waiting for her return, their empty stomachs a more immediate duty than a fallen stranger's fate. But her eyes would not leave him. She saw the subtle, shallow rise and fall of his back. He was alive, but fading. The sun was directly overhead now, a brutal hammer. Another 10 minutes crawled by. The man had become part of the scenery, an accepted hazard to be avoided. No one was going to help him. If she did nothing, he would die there, on the side of the road. And by evening someone would complain about the smell, and the park chairman would pay some boys 50 naira to drag the body away. The memory of her father's still face merged with the man's prone form. The knot in her chest tightened into a decision. She could not save her father. But this man, this stranger with the eyes of a trapped eagle, was still breathing. With a resolve that overrode a lifetime of learned caution, Amara acted. She grabbed 2 sachets of her pure water, her livelihood, her capital, and without a second thought, abandoned her unprotected table. She hitched up her simple wrapper and ran, dodging between passengers and luggage carts, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, defiant urgency. She reached his side, kneeling in the dust without regard for her clean clothes. Up close, he was worse. His lips were blistered and cracked, his skin hot to the touch. The intelligence she had seen was shrouded by unconsciousness. He was far gone. "Sir?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Oga. There was no response. The indifference of the crowd around her was a wall at her back. She was alone with this dying man. Her fingers fumbled, then tore a corner of the first sachet with her teeth. Gently, she lifted his heavy head, cradling it in the crook of her arm. She brought the torn corner to his lips and squeezed. The clear, cool water trickled into his mouth, over his parched lips. For a moment, nothing. Then, a reflex. A swallow. A weak, sputtering cough. Amara's watchful eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. She squeezed again. Drink, she urged softly, to the man, to herself, to the uncaring world. Just drink. In that moment, she was no longer just a water seller. She was a lifeline, and she had just thrown one end into the deep, dark water, hoping against hope that something, or someone, would hold on. The sachet of mercy. The water was a miracle, not in its source. It came from the same municipal borehole as every other sachet in Olok, but in its timing, in its journey from Amara's hand to the cracked, desperate lips of the fallen man. The first few drops simply traced the dust in the grooves of his lips. Then, a muscle in his throat twitched. A swallow, weak as a fledgling's first flutter. Amara held her breath, her own world narrowing to the space between her hand and his mouth. She squeezed the sachet again, a slender, persistent stream. He coughed, a dry, racking sound that shook his whole frame, but his eyelids fluttered. Easy, sir, she murmured, her voice a soft counterpoint to the motor park's roar. Easy. Small. She let the last of the first sachet drain, then tore open the second with her teeth. This time, he was more aware. His head moved slightly in her arm, and his lips parted, seeking the water like a plant seeks the sun. He drank in earnest, a deep, gulping swallow that made his atoms apple bob painfully. When he had taken about half, his eyes opened fully. They were bloodshot, clouded with confusion and a pain deeper than physical hurt. They focused on her face, hovering above him, backlit by the harsh sun, so she seemed crowned with light. For a dizzying second, he didn't see a poor water seller in a faded wrapper. He saw an angel of deliverance, materialized from the very dust that had tried to claim him. He tried to speak. A rasp, a scrape of sound. Tach, thank you. The words were formal, absurd in their context, a ghost of his old life pushing through. Amara shook her head, dismissing the thanks. It was not needed. Can you sit? She asked, practicality returning. She couldn't hold him here forever. With her support, he managed to push himself up to a sitting position, his back against the rough bark of a nearby tree. He was shaking, a fine tremor that ran through his whole body. He looked at his own hands, filthy and trembling, as if they belonged to someone else. Then his gaze swept over the motor park, the people who were now stealing glances, their indifference shifting to curiosity now that someone had intervened. A shadow of his earlier humiliation passed over his face. They thought I was mad, he said, the words a low, wounded confession. Amara followed his gaze, then looked back at him, her eyes direct and clear. Let them think what they want, she said, a quiet steel in her voice. I have a brother who has seizures. People who do not know also think foolish things. It is their own blindness, not your truth. Her words were a balm. They didn't just offer water. They offered a restoration of dignity. He was a man to her, not a monster. He looked at the empty sachets in the dust, then at her simple table in the distance. Understanding dawned, bringing with it a fresh wave of awe. This woman had left her livelihood, her capital, exposed and untended to save a stranger. She had poured her merchandise, her profit, into the mouth of a man everyone else saw as worthless. You left your shop, he stated, the magnitude of her sacrifice leaving him humbled. The water was more useful here, she said simply, as if it were the most obvious equation in the world. Can you tell me your name? What happened to you? He opened his mouth, the instinct to reveal himself, Bola Adikunal, of Adikunal Holdings, rising. But a sharper instinct, born of the last 24 hours of betrayal and danger, clamped it shut. Kola was still out there. His accomplices were out there. This town was unknown. Trust was a luxury that had nearly killed him. I was attacked, he said, the truth pared down to its safest core. Robbed. Taken far from home. I escaped. I have been walking all night. He looked at her, his eyes pleading now, not for water, but for continued sanctuary. I need to get to a hospital, and I need to call my family. Please." The plea was raw, real. Amara saw no madness in it, only the stark aftermath of terror. She nodded, her decision already made the moment she ran to him. She stood, brushing the dust from her knees. Her table was still unattended. It was a risk, but some risks, she felt in her soul, were commanded by a force greater than fear. "Wait here," she said. "Do not move. I will find help." She turned and hurried not back to her table, but towards a cluster of Okada riders she knew by sight. Men who waited for fares under the shade of a gnarled tree. Men who respected her because she always had a cool sachet of water for them on a hot day. She approached the most reliable-looking one, a man named Sewell with kind eyes in a weathered face. "Sewell, I need your help. That man by the tree, he is not a madman. He has been robbed and beaten. He needs to get to the clinic. I will pay your fare when we get there." Her voice was firm, brooking no argument. Sewell looked from Amara's earnest face to the shivering, bedraggled man under the tree. He trusted Amara. He'd seen her kindness before. With a nod, he kick-started his motorbike. Together, Amara and Sewell helped the stranger onto the back of the Okada. He was weak, clinging to Sewell with a desperation that spoke of his utter exhaustion. Amara climbed on behind him, a steadying presence, her arms holding onto the sides of the bike to bracket him in. As the Okada sputtered to life and pulled away from the motor park, Amara didn't look back at her table. She looked ahead, towards the small, sun-bleached building with a red cross painted on the wall. In her hands, she had held 2 sachets of water. Now, she held the fragile weight of a man's life, trusting that the mercy she had offered would be enough to carry them both to a safer shore. The clinic and the call. The Olok Comprehensive Health Center was a monument to strained resilience. Its once white walls were stained by rain and time, and the scent of antiseptic fought a constant, losing battle with the pervasive smell of dust and heat. But to Bola, supported between Amara and the steady Okada rider Sewell, its rusting gate was the entrance to a sanctuary. They staggered into the reception area, a scene of controlled chaos. Mothers hushed crying babies on long wooden benches. A weary nurse moved behind a high desk stacked with tattered folders. All eyes turned to the strange trio, the wild-looking man, the determined young woman in a dusty wrapper, and the stoic Okada man. Amara guided Bola to a bench, his legs buckling beneath him. "Sit, rest," she instructed, her voice the only steady thing in his spinning world. She then marched to the desk, ignoring the stares. "Nurse, good afternoon. This man is very sick. He was attacked and has walked all night. He needs to see a doctor now." The nurse, a woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense bun, peered over her glasses at Bola's disheveled form. "Has he been registered? Has he paid the card fee? We are very busy." Amara didn't hesitate. From the small, knotted pouch tucked in her wrapper, she pulled out the day's earnings, a crumpled collection of Naira notes, stained with sweat from her palm. It was money for food, for kerosene, for Chitty's school notebook. She smoothed the bills on the counter. "How much for the card and to see the doctor?" "This is all I have." The nurse's expression softened, just a fraction. She saw the genuine worry in Amara's eyes, the selfless act in the proffered money. She took a portion of the notes, scribbled on a buff-colored card, and handed it back. "Take him to the last door on the right. Dr. Adesina is there." In the small, stark examination room, Dr. Adesina, a young man with patient hands, worked with quiet efficiency. He cleaned Bola's wounds, treated him for severe dehydration with a saline drip, and checked for serious injuries. Bola endured it all in a daze, his gaze constantly seeking Amara, who stood by the door like a sentinel, having refused to leave. "You are a very lucky man," Dr. Adesina said finally, snapping off his gloves. "Severe exhaustion, dehydration, multiple contusions, and lacerations. But no broken bones, no internal bleeding. Your system has had a terrible shock, but with rest and fluids, you will recover." He looked from Bola to Amara. "You have a guardian angel." Bola's throat tightened. He looked at Amara, who simply nodded, her mission not yet complete. "Doctor," Bola rasped, his voice still rough. "A phone. I must call my family. Please." Dr. Adesina hesitated, glancing at the battered, anonymous figure on the bed. But the man's plea held a desperate authority that belied his appearance. With a sigh, he pulled a simple, old-fashioned mobile phone from his pocket. 3 minutes, he said. The bill is high. Bola took the phone. His fingers, grimy and trembling, dialed a number from memory. Not his office, not an assistant, but his private line to his wife, Aisha. A number he knew by heart, a lifeline to his other world. It rang once, twice. Hello. Aisha's voice was a breathless, tear-choked whisper, worn thin by a night and day of unimaginable terror. Aisha. The name was a sob, a prayer, a key turning in a long-locked door. A sharp, shattered cry came through the line. Bola? Bola? Is it you? My God, where are you? Your voice, are you all right? The words tumbled out in a torrent. I'm alive. I'm safe. I'm at a clinic. In a town called Olok, I think. I don't know where it is. He squeezed his eyes shut, concentrating on the essential. I was kidnapped. I escaped. I'm hurt, but I'm okay. The people here, a woman helped me. His eyes found Amara again. She saved my life. Olok. Okay, we'll find it. He could hear her shouting orders, the background chaos of his home turning from despair into frantic action. The police are here. Your brother is here. We're coming. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone else. We're coming right now. Aisha, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for. Stop. Just be there. Be alive. We are coming. Her voice broke, full of a love so fierce it vibrated through the cheap plastic phone. In the sudden quiet of the room, the weight of everything settled. The terror of the abduction, the desperation of the bush, the crushing indifference of the road, and finally, the staggering, unexpected kindness of a stranger. He looked at Amara, who had paid for his care with her meager earnings, who had vouched for him when no one else would, who had been his only tether to humanity. Thank you, he said again, the words utterly inadequate. I will repay you. For everything. Amara shook her head, a small, weary smile touching her lips. The adrenaline was fading, and the reality of her empty table, her spent money, was returning. There is no debt for a life, she said softly, repeating a proverb her mother had loved. Just use it well. Outside, the sun began its slow descent. In the distance, the sound of powerful car engines and concerned voices began to grow, cutting through the usual sounds of Olok. Help was speeding towards him, a world away from the lonely bush and the dusty motor park. But in that quiet clinic room, the most important journey had already been completed. It wasn't the journey from captivity to freedom, but the journey from being a faceless, fallen thing to being a man again. A journey made possible by a sachet of water, a woman's courage, and a 3-minute call that reached across the void. The rescue was imminent, but the salvation had already happened. The revelation and the reward. The quiet of the clinic was shattered by the sound of tires screeching to a halt on the gravel outside, the slamming of car doors, and a tide of urgent voices. Before the nurse at the front desk could even rise, the small reception area was flooded with people. Aisha Adekunle led the charge. Her elegant Ankara wrap was creased from a day of frantic worry, her eyes swollen from tears, but they now blazed with a ferocious, relieved intensity. Behind her came Bola's younger brother, Tund, his face set in grim focus, and 2 plainclothes police officers who moved with a quiet, authoritative air. My husband, Aisha said to the stunned nurse, her voice trembling but clear. Bola Adekunle. He called from here. Where is he? The nurse, utterly overwhelmed, simply pointed a finger down the corridor to the last door on the right. Aisha was there in seconds. She pushed the door open and froze on the threshold. The sight of her husband, propped up on a narrow bed, swathed in bandages, his face a map of cuts and exhaustion, hit her like a physical blow. A sob escaped her, but she swallowed it, crossing the room in 3 strides. She didn't hug him, seeing his flinch, but she took his clean, bandaged hand in both of hers, holding it to her forehead, her tears finally falling freely. Bola, she whispered, the word containing a universe of fear and love. I'm here, he murmured, his own eyes glistening. I'm here. Tund and the officers entered, their presence filling the small room. The officers began asking quiet, rapid-fire questions about the kidnappers, the location, the van. Bola answered as best he could, his mind still foggy. But his description of Kola was sharp and devastatingly clear. Through it all, Amara had retreated to a corner by the window, making herself small. This was not her world. The expensive perfumes, the sharp urgency, the clear authority, it all spoke of a life as distant from Olok Motor Park as the moon. She watched the reunion, a bittersweet ache in her heart. Her job was done. The man was safe with his people. She thought of her table, her unsold water, her hungry siblings. She needed to go. She began to inch towards the door. Wait. The voice was Bola's, weak but commanding. All eyes in the room turned to him, then followed his gaze to the young woman trying to disappear. This is her, Bola said, his voice strengthening with emotion. This is Amara. She is the reason I am alive. Aisha turned, really seeing Amara for the first time. The simple, dusty wrapper, the kind, watchful eyes, the posture of someone used to being overlooked. The magnitude of what this young woman, so plainly poor, must have done for her husband crashed over her. Releasing Bola's hand, Aisha crossed the room and did what felt utterly natural. She pulled Amara into a fierce, genuine embrace. Thank you, Aisha whispered into her hair, her voice thick. Thank you for seeing my husband when the world was blind. Amara stood stiffly for a moment, then softened, patting Aisha's back awkwardly. It was nothing, Ma. He needed help. It was everything, Bola corrected from the bed. In the following days, as Bola recovered at a private hospital in Lagos, the wheels of justice and gratitude began to turn. Kola and his gang were tracked down and arrested at a hideout in Badagry, their grand plans unraveled by their own greed and incompetence. Bola insisted the prosecution be swift but fair, a complex mix of anger and pity warring within him. But his primary focus became Amara. His investigators brought him a basic report: parents deceased, sole guardian to two younger siblings in a single room in a swampside slum, eking out a living selling pure water. Each detail was a stone on his conscience. She had given everything she had for a stranger. One bright afternoon, 3 weeks after the ordeal, a sleek car pulled up not to Amara's ramshackle home, but to a bustling commercial street in a better part of Lagos. Bola, looking more like himself though thinner and with a new gravity in his eyes, stepped out. Beside him was Amara, brought there under a pretext of needing to discuss something. He stopped in front of a smart, newly painted shop. The sign above the bright blue doors read, Amara's Pure Water Depot. In the large, sparkling clean window were not just stacks of sachets, but rows of bottled water, gleaming dispensers, branded refrigerators, and even a shiny blue delivery tricycle parked inside. Amara stared, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. What is this? Bola turned to her, a gentle smile on his face. This is yours, Amara. She shook her head, a nervous laugh escaping. Mine? No, there is a mistake. I manage a table, I don't own a. You do now, Bola said firmly but kindly. He nodded to a man in a suit, a lawyer, who stepped forward with a folder. The deed is in your name. The business license. All of it. It is fully stocked. The first month's rent and salaries for 2 assistants are already paid. Amara's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes scanned the shop, the space, the stock, the potential. This wasn't just a gift, it was a transformation. It was security. It was a future where a bad day didn't mean hunger. It was a bridge from survival to stability. I cannot accept this, she stammered, though her eyes devoured the scene. You can, and you will, Bola said. You did not ask for a reward when you gave me water. You asked for nothing. But I must build a bridge back to you. This is not payment. A life has no price. This, he gestured to the shop, is an investment. An investment in the kind of compassion that changes worlds. My world was changed by it. Now, let it change yours. Tears, silent and overwhelming, streamed down Amara's face. They were not tears of pity for her old life, but of awe for the new one suddenly, miraculously laid before her. She looked from the grand shop to the man who had been a fallen stranger and saw not a billionaire, but the man whose head she had cradled in the dust. The revelation was complete. The poor water seller now stood as an owner. The reward was not just a shop, but a testament to the truth that the most powerful currency in the world is not naira or dollars, but mercy, offered without expectation and recognized with grace. The revelation and the reward. The quiet of the clinic was shattered. Tires bit gravel, doors slammed, and a wave of urgent voices surged into the modest reception. Aisha Adekunle entered first, her grace sharpened by a day of anguish. Her eyes, red-rimmed and fierce, scanned the room. Two police officers and Bola's brother, Tund, flanked her, their presence sucking the air from the cramped space. "My husband," Aisha stated, her voice a blade cutting through the clutter. The nurse, stunned silent, merely pointed a trembling finger down the hall. Aisha found the door, pushed it open, and froze. The sight of Bola, propped up, bandaged, his face a canvas of cuts and exhaustion, stole her breath. A sound, part sob, part gasp, escaped her. In 3 strides she was at his side, but instead of an embrace, she took his less injured hand and pressed it to her damp cheek, her shoulders trembling with the force of her relief. "Bola, I'm here, Shah," he whispered, the old endearment a fragile thread to their normalcy. Tund and the officers filed in, the room shrinking further. Questions began, low and urgent. Descriptions of Kola, the van, the uncompleted building. Bola answered, his voice gaining strength as he spoke, the act of recounting helping to reclaim his sense of order. Through it all, Amara had become a shadow in the corner by the window. The electric concern in the room, the expensive fabrics, the aura of consequence. It was a world that rendered her invisible in a new way. Her duty was done. The man was with his own. Thoughts of her unattended table, her siblings' empty stomachs, pulled at her. She began to edge toward the door, a silent retreat. "Wait." Bola's voice, though tired, carried. All eyes turned from him to the young woman caught in mid-creep. "This is her," Bola said, his gaze anchoring Amara to the spot. "This is Amara. She is the reason I am breathing." Aisha turned. She truly looked at Amara now. The simple, worn wrapper, the calm eyes and a tired face, the hands that were not idle but looked capable. The story Bola had haltingly told over the phone, of being seen, of water from a stranger, crystallized into this young woman's form. Releasing Bola's hand, Aisha crossed the room and, without a word, gathered Amara into a deep, heartfelt embrace. It was not the gesture of a benefactor, but of one profoundly grateful soul to another. "Thank you," Aisha breathed, her voice muffled against Amara's shoulder. "Thank you for your eyes. Thank you for your heart." Amara stood stiffly, then slowly relaxed, returning the embrace with a gentle pat. "He needed help, Ma. That's all." "It was everything," Bola corrected softly from the bed. The following weeks were a whirlwind beyond Amara's imagination. From the sparse clinic, Bola was transferred to a private hospital in Lagos that looked like a 5-star hotel. Kola and his gang were swiftly arrested, their hideout discovered exactly where Bola had described. Bola, from his hospital bed, gave clear instructions: justice, but no vengeance. His grief over Kola's betrayal was a private, painful wound. His public focus, however, was singular: Amara. His quiet investigators provided a brief, brutal dossier: parents deceased, guardian to 2 siblings, income, pure water sales, residence, a single room in Makoko. Each fact was a weight on Bola's conscience. She had poured her meager capital, her very livelihood, into saving him. A month after the ordeal, on a bright Lagos morning, a car arrived for Amara. Bola's assistant, a polite young woman, asked her to come for a meeting. They drove not to an office, but to a lively street in Surulere and stopped in front of a vibrant, newly painted storefront. Amara stepped out, confused. The sign above the shop, in crisp blue and white lettering, read, "Amara's Pure Water Depot." She stared, her mind refusing to connect the words to reality. What is this place?" Bola, leaning on a polished cane, emerged from the car behind her. The physical scars were fading, but a new depth had settled in his eyes. "It's yours, Amara." She shook her head, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "Mine? No, there is a mistake. I sell water on a table. This is a big shop. This is for a big business person." "It is for you," Bola said, his voice gentle but firm. He nodded to a man nearby, a lawyer, who stepped forward with a sleek folder. "The deed is here. The business license. Everything is in your name, Amara Nwachukwu. It is fully stocked. The rent is paid for a year. I have hired 2 assistants to start. They are inside. The delivery tricycle is registered to the business." He presented it not as charity, but as a settled fact. Amara's eyes wandered over the gleaming interior visible through the glass. The neat pyramids of bottled water, the branded coolers, the scales, the counter. This was not just a gift, it was an ecosystem. It was safety. It was a tomorrow where a rainstorm didn't mean ruin. It was dignity, bottled and branded. Tears, hot and silent, traced paths down her cheeks. She wasn't crying for her past struggles, but from the sheer, overwhelming scale of the future suddenly unveiled before her. I do not know what to say. This is too much, she whispered. Bola took a careful step closer. Amara, you gave me water when I was nothing but dust. You saw a man when everyone else saw a nuisance. You did not ask for a reward. This, he gestured to the shop, is not a reward. It is a partnership. I am investing in the rarest, most powerful resource I know, a heart that gives without counting the cost. You changed the course of my life. Now, let this help you chart the course of yours. The revelation was complete. The woman who had owned nothing but a wooden table and her integrity now held the keys to her own empire of essentials. The reward was not transactional. It was transformational. It whispered a profound truth, that in the economy of human kindness, the smallest, most selfless deposit can yield a fortune, changing not one life, but every life it touches thereafter. From salesgirl to owner. The morning sun warmed the bright blue facade of Amara's Pure Water Depot, glinting off the newly painted sign. Inside, the air was cool, carrying the faint, clean smell of plastic and filtered water. The two assistants, Chica and Femi, moved with efficient ease, Chica arranging a new delivery of 50-liter dispenser bottles, Femi tallying the morning's sachet sales on a digital tablet. The branded blue tricycle sat parked by the open shop door, ready for deliveries. Amara stood behind the counter, not as a visitor, but as its center. Her hands, once calloused from hauling heavy bags of sachets, now rested on a smooth laminate surface as she reviewed an invoice. She wore a simple but new Ankara dress, a gift from Aisha Adekunal, its vibrant pattern echoing the shop's own vitality. The transformation was not just in her surroundings, but in the set of her shoulders. The watchful tension of perpetual survival had eased into the calm authority of ownership. The first weeks had been a dizzying education. Bola had not just handed her keys and vanished. His office had provided a gentle, patient business advisor, Madame Gozi, who spent days with Amara, explaining margins, inventory control, supplier contracts, and basic bookkeeping. They opened a bank account. They designed a simple logo. Amara, whose formal education had been cut short, absorbed it all with a fierce, focused intelligence born of necessity. She was not just learning to run a shop. She was learning to build a legacy. The true revelation, the twist Bola's investigators had missed in their initial, clinical report, came to light during one of these sessions. Madame Gozi was reviewing asset ownership. So, the delivery tricycle is fully depreciable over 5 years, Madame Gozi explained, pointing at the ledger. Amara nodded, then hesitated. The table, my old wooden table at the motor park. What should we do with it? Madame Gozi looked up. It's yours to dispose of course. It's your asset. A strange, wistful smile touched Amara's lips. It was never my asset. Not really. Puzzled, Madame Gozi probed gently, and the truth unfolded. The prime spot at the Olok Motor Park, the wooden table, they belonged to a sharp-tongued woman named Ayaloya, who owned several such spots. Amara was not an owner. She was a tenant, a salesgirl in all but name. She paid a daily fee for the space and the use of the table, surrendering a portion of her meager profits before she even bought her stock. Her entire existence had been one of precarious tenancy, forever at the mercy of another's whim. When Bola learned this, the gift of the shop took on a deeper, more profound meaning. He had not simply upgraded her business. He had broken the very chains of her economic servitude. He had transformed her from a salesgirl, invisible and disposable in the informal economy, into an owner with a title, a license, and a future she controlled. This new status humbled and energized Amara in equal measure. She did not hoard her security. She extended it. Every morning, she set aside a crate of sachet water. Not for sale, but for free. The street sweepers who battled the dawn dust received a cool sachet with a grateful smile. The weary Okada riders, including Sewell who had helped her that fateful day, knew they could stop for a free drink. She hired her younger brother, Chitty, after school to help with light cleaning, paying him a proper wage that made his chest puff with pride. One afternoon, Bola and Aisha visited, not in a formal convoy, but quietly. They stood across the street for a moment, watching. They saw Amara patiently explain a water dispenser's features to a young couple. They saw her laugh with Chica as they restocked a shelf. They saw the easy respect in the nods of her delivery customers. "She's not just running a shop," Aisha murmured, her arm linked with Bola's. "She's building a community." Bola nodded, a deep satisfaction settling in his spirit. The bridges he built were of steel and concrete, of policies and donations. Amara was building a different kind of bridge, one made of daily kindness, of shared dignity, of cool water offered freely under a punishing sun. She was a bridge builder in her own right. As they entered the shop, a bell chiming softly, Amara looked up, her face lit with a smile that was no longer the hesitant smile of a beneficiary, but the warm, assured smile of a hostess in her own domain. "Welcome," she said. "Can I offer you some water?" It was the same offer she had made in the dust, but everything had changed. From salesgirl to owner, her journey had come full circle, proving that the most powerful transformations often begin not with a grand design, but with a simple, selfless act. And in the cool, orderly space of Amara's pure water depot, that act continued to ripple outward, a perpetual fountain of grace in a thirsty world. And so, in the heart of Lagos, a new kind of bridge was built, not of concrete or steel, but of compassion, courage, and a single cup of water offered at the right time. It reminds us that our greatest power often lies not in our wealth or status, but in our simple humanity, in seeing someone who has been overlooked and choosing to act. Thank you so much for watching. If this story of hope and transformation touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs a lift today, and subscribe for more powerful tales from Nigeria and beyond. Until next time, remember, no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Stay blessed and stay tuned.